Hello, everybody. This is Chairman Jack, the ULF. We're back with another video. This time, we're going to do a brief analysis of Latin American dictatorships, Brazil, more specifically, as we have a member of the Brazilian Communist Party with us currently. And then we're going to talk about how Bolsonaro is in the legacy of the Latin American dictatorships. So I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Leonardo. You can call me Leo. I'm 21. I'm studying international relations in the Federal University of São Paulo. And I've been a member of the Brazilian Communist Party for around 3 years and a few months now.
Very cool. So we can start on basically from square one. Is a lot of these Latin American dictatorships in their current form came out of U.S. intervention starting in the 40s and the 50s, trying to end the threat of communism at the same time taking a lot of these countries' resources. You saw this very, very early on in nations like Panama, that even its own existence really came into being because the U.S. wanted the Panama Canal. But you had very, very early coups, like the Costa Rican Civil War in 1948, that the U.S. backed rebels against the government because they deemed the government too friendly to communists. So the communists, in support of the government, waged a prolonged civil war that ended with U.S. rebels taking over. Then you saw the same thing in Guatemala in 1953, where the banana tycoons were given nearly absolute power after Arbenz was overthrown. And then you just saw this all over the Latin American world, which is far too many coups to count, whether it be the death squads in Nicaragua, the Honduran coup that just happened in 2009 under Barack Obama, as it continued to be carried out under the Trump regime, whether it be one of the most terrifying coups in 1973 on September 11th under Augusto Pinochet with the overthrow of Salvador Allende. Really, any coup you want to name. Many of these were based around trying to get resources and defending the United States' interests, and upholding the Monroe Doctrine of the U.S. can do whatever and wherever it wants in the Americas because they can.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we had in a state of what we usually called was usually called a national security state, but it's actually just a cover up for we're locking up the communists and we're preventing the revolution to arise. And actually, what a theorist of our country called Rui Mauro Marini. I think I have some articles of him in English. He called state of permanent counter-revolution, in which you, in the worst case scenario, you stop and you do the measures of counter-revolutioning, but at the very least you can stop whatever's going on here and you can prevent a communist revolution to arise. It's not by coincidence that in the first interview that Bolsonaro gave to the television after he was elected, not only elected, when he took office, he said the interviewers were like, okay, you talked a lot about a communist threat and stuff like that, but don't you really think you're kind of out of the line here? Don't you think you're exaggerating in any degree? And he was like, no, look, we've been under a communist threat since 1922, and for the most part he became even more of a joke because he seems like a paranoid. But actually, 1922 was when the Brazilian Communist Party was founded, March 25 of 1922. So he got a pretty good teachings on anti-communism when he was serving the military, which was in the period of the military dictatorship. He learned that from it's called Agulhas Negras, black. I don't remember the name now, but the military academy.
Mhm.
He's learning that from them. Like it's clearly been going on, and they're clearly teaching this nowadays. Like the military suffered a huge intervention, because this goes all the way back to our leader. He was called Luis Carlos Prestes. When he started, we had this movement in Brazil from the lieutenants. The lieutenants were actually quite politically woke, like you would say nowadays. He was like, they were like having the front in political movements. Every couple of years, you would have a rise of the military led by lieutenants, and Prestes was one of these lieutenants. He joined with another columns of lieutenants, and he actually became the leader of this entire column called Coluna Prestes, the Prestes column. He led the column all over Brazil, fighting the conventional military, fighting the state army, without ever being defeated. Like, and this was like in the 20s, in the 30s. He never got defeated. He was not a communist, but he was kind of politically putting himself in the stage at that
Yeah,
time.
sympathetic.
Yeah, he was sympathetic, and he never got defeated. He ran the entire country. He did a march that was actually bigger than Mao Zedong did in China. We have some reasons to believe that he, one way or another, heard about this. He studied this experiment in Brazil, and probably where he drew inspiration from it. So when the column was off, he left to Argentina and Bolivia, and it was there that he studied Marxism. When he came back, he joined the Brazilian Communist Party, and a few years later, he's the general secretary. And that brought an entire group of military people inside the Communist Party. We had, along with the usual secretaries that you have in the Central Committee, we had like generals for the army, generals of the Marines, generals of the Air Force. Uh, we have an entire chain of command inside the Communist Party for the military. So, and we kept that over the Vargas dictatorship, because that's the point. Even though Vargas was completely against the communists, and he was like using a fake communist coup to strengthen the and make his dictatorship even tired and even restrictive. He never got into the Communist Party. He never got like fully destroying the Communist Party. It was not a plan. He of course he locked up Prestes in the jail for as long as he was the leader, but did not destroy the Communist Party. We actually left that even stronger than we had, because in 1945 we finally had the end of World War II, and Brazil participated a little bit, and it kind of became a contradiction. Like, okay, you fought alongside the U.S. for liberty and stuff, but you don't feel like you're doing something wrong here, and with some other aspects of internal politics, he stand off. He led some elections, and in the legislative, we had actually a surprisingly amount of communists being elected. If I'm not mistaken, now we had around 12 to 17 uh, federal deputies. We had one senator that was Prestes. Prestes was elected senator. At the time, he made the most outstanding number of votes. He won a record at that time, and we almost got some mayors elected in some big cities. You could tell we were great. We were huge. and in 47 we were forbidden to exist once again. Like I like to to quote the Communist Manifesto, that the history of humanity is the history of class struggle. The history of the Brazilian Communist Party is the history of being forbidden, being illegal. Uh, but it was two completely different military dictatorships, and I think that that's one of the reasons we were caught so off guard by it, because we actually left stronger from the first one. So we were like, okay, we can handle this. It's not gonna last long. That was a general thought among, not even among the communists, but among bourgeois mainstream politicians. We had like our our ex-president Juscelino Kubitschek. He was, you can call him JK. He was the president in the 50s. He and Carlos Lacerda was another. He was almost like man of opposition. He opposed everybody and everyone. They were like getting themselves ready to compete in the 1965 elections. They were like completely sure that the military were taking over just for order, securities, order reasons. Like we don't get to let João Goulart assume. But okay, they won't let him assume. Uh, but they're gonna let go, and next year we have elections. That's how the entire country got off guard. We I'm not sure if I'm talking too much. If Jack wants to say anything, cut
Oh
me
no,
off,
no, no.
because
I
I'm
was
just going out.
train of thought. Oh
You
no,
can
no.
go on.
Oh
Just
no, no. You're entirely good. I was listening. I very much liked no, because what you're saying is I think very true of many communist movements all across Latin America, of going through stages of going through political dominance, or not even true dominance, but relevancy, being banned, and then having to go back underneath the rug to build themselves up again. You saw this in Chile, where only now is the Communist Party even gaining any ground, and a lot of their messaging has been really liberalized in order to mainstream itself post their dictatorship from Pinochet. The only nation that you truly saw making genuine swides into leftism was Honduras, where they were nearly they're I believe they called them had their line officially being socialist and syndicalist, or syndicist, however you want to pronounce it. But that was their official line, and they got overthrown in 2009. Very similar to what they're trying to do in Venezuela right now, but we won't get into Venezuela here. That'll be left for a future video. But no, I think what you're saying, even though it is deeply connected, or like everything you said about Brazil, I just think it's deeply connected to everything that went on in Latin America throughout all these countries, of their various communist movements building themselves up only to be made illegal and trying to be dismantled. You can see the same thing with the Shining Path in Peru, where they were building more and more and more predominance and more support among the rural people, only to be massively gunned down and murdered by Fujimori and his regime. Or the same thing with FARC, how FARC massively had support all across the rural areas. You can see that in the referendum that they did on supporting the amendment that would have made FARC a legitimate political party and give them at least a certain number of seats. And you can look at the split where a massive amount of urban people, or the urban bourgeoisie, did not want to support them, versus all the rural people that loved FARC because FARC defended them from the drug gangs and the government brutalizing them. Because once again, all these movements all across Latin America, of these progressive communist movements, are trying to overthrow these brutal class relations that are set up by like the Encomienda, where these like people that are the most similar to like the colonial powers, the people that are the most white, whether they be like basically Peninsulares, like the people who are the most white in Brazil, or the people who are the most white all across Latin America, who are the most Portuguese or Spanish, still hold the most power. You can see this in Brazil, like Bolsonaro. He is very, very white versus, and who supported him the most, the top 50% of people were more overwhelmingly going to vote for him than the bottom 50% who voted for Haddad. And this bottom 50% of the poorest people, who are they? Oh, they're former African slaves or indigenous people or mixed. And you still see this all over Latin America. You see this even in Argentina, where they're probably the whitest country in Latin America. And yet they still have this massive racial divide with the small amount of indigenous people that still live there. They're still persecuted and treated as lessers. You saw this very much true under Pinochet. So these communist movements double as liberation movements, because the only way these racial groups all across Latin America can be liberated is if the class relations change. And the only way these class relations are going to change is if the communists gain power. So I just think that's very true. All these movements are very, very similar all across Latin America. They all have very, very similar roots of gaining power around the same time from these imperialist nations of Spain and Portugal. And I just think a lot of their movements are very similar, because they're all trying to still, overthrow the plantation, get themselves out of the encomienda, and liberate themselves from their chains. And the only way that that can be done is through the Communist Party, but the Communist Party will always constantly be banned and harassed because the class relations are in such a way that the ruling party or the ruling group elite will never want to lose power to these minorities and these communists that threaten their stranglehold on power.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, like, when in the first time you can tell, like, okay, you kind of have a reason. Like, I can understand what you're doing. Like, okay, the Communist Party is actually really good and really big. You have, I can understand why you're doing this. Like, even though we didn't at the time, because like, when you implement a new strategy or a new tactic, you're caught off guard. Like, when we first heard about the Arab Spring, it was a complete new strategy of hybrid wars that we're just now starting to study and starting to understand, and that's what's getting us to look at Venezuela and say, hey, you're doing the same thing. But actually now I think it's not almost about the fighting the communists. I think it's just an old chant that you bring back, like, let's fight the communists again and stuff. But it's actually more when you're afraid of what they could do once you start doing what you're about to do. Like, once you're about to wipe off all of their rights, when you're about to decrease minimum wage, when you're about to screw the workers, you can better start. You better start feeling a little afraid of what the communists might do. So it's more about what they might do than actually how they can do. Because honestly, we're dismantled right now. I was talking, like, before, how because of this dictatorship in the 60s, they were all over our heads. Like, they went for our neck in that. A third of our central committee was dead. Another third was how to say, when the word when you send people out of the country, there's a word for it.
Exiled.
When you Yes, exiled. Another third was exiled, and the last third that remained, actually in the 90s, tried to dismantle the party. We had a general secretary called Roberto Freire, who actually called an extra congress, just to vote away the name Communist Party. He wanted, like, the name Popular Socialist Party, which now has nothing of popular and has nothing socialist about it. It's just another physiological party that votes and supports the right wing in the Congress. Like, and they're like going to fuse themselves with other parties to make a bigger one. So completely physiological. But that actually destroyed us a lot because he brought people who were non-party members to vote in the Congress and vote for him, vote for his ideas of letting go of the Communist Party. So we had to start from zero around the first half of the 90s, like 93, I think. We got our registration back as the Communist Party. Uh, so we're just building up right away. So we're not huge. We're clearly not huge. We have other parties, not only the Brazilian Communist parties. We have PSOL, which is Party of Socialism and Freedom. Very similar to in the name, very similar to the one in the United States. They are actually a fraction of the Workers' Party here. They left in 2004, 2005, around this time, because they started disagreeing a lot with what the Workers' Party were doing, which was actually liberalizing the economy and voting against the workers every time. All the irony, right? The Workers' Party voting against the workers. And you see, like 2005, 2006 is not a long time for you to build up and pose a threat. So we're all in the same boat, in the same small boat, actually, right now. So you can say that we're a threat right now. Like we're
Yeah.
not armed. We don't have like, I don't know, 5 million of membership, ready to take power and ready to influence in the national politics. We're clearly far from that. So it's much more an ideological reasoning. You need a reason. You need a motive to
Yeah.
do these things. Like, and you
Well,
have. Oh, okay. Go.
I was gonna say, well, with that, and Bolsonaro now being in power, do you fear that you guys will have to go back to square one again, and you guys will be targeted? Because I know he's been targeting, what was it, the landless peasant movement or something like that, and various other like groups. Like literally on the day one, he like went into universities and like took thousands of professors and arrested them for having too many communist sympathies. Do you think that you or your party will be targeted, or even you will be targeted by the government for being within the party?
Yes, it's just a matter of time. We're actually having an extra life right now because uh, mainly two reasons. The first one is this government. It's completely built by. I'm not saying popular, but I'm saying by themselves. You know, like Bolsonaro was never the first bet of any section of the bourgeoisie here. So he never got support. He never got like like bourgeois support, you know, like from mainstream politicians. He doesn't know how to handle these things. So there's clearly a lack of unity, a lack of organization inside the government. Like one day, one person, one minister is saying a thing, and the other day they're saying another thing, and they just can't get along. They just can't say the same thing. They can't stand on the same page for more than 2 days. They're actually just to give you an example. Uh, we have here a ministry that's called the Ministry of the Civil House in a free translation. It works to kind of help the president to arrange everything, to get everything in order, to get everyone working together. He represents the president for the Congress. He leads negotiations with the Congress, and they were so mad at this how to like a decommunistization of the government machine. But they were basically just wiping out and firing people who voted for the Workers' Party, or who had any sympathy for the left. they fired so many people that they fired the person who handles firings. Like, you can't fire anyone else because you fired the guy who handles the firings. So, and they were like, okay, let's hire him again. Oh, I can't because I fired the guy who handles the hirings. So they were kind of stuck. I'm not even joking. This was on the mainstream papers. This was on the bourgeois papers. Like, they're completely deorganized. They don't know how to handle this. They're completely newcomers. Uh, they don't have experience at all. Like, the annual budget of the government. Like, I know you suffered from Trump recently because he basically locked up the government. Bolsonaro is about to do the same thing, but it's not because he wants something. He wants a wall. He simply doesn't know how to handle it. He doesn't know how to study it. He doesn't know he needs to approve this as soon as possible, so federal buildings, federal universities can pay scholarships to the students who need support. Can pay for basically the functioning of the buildings, of hiring teachers and paying their wages. So he doesn't know. He's completely unaware of how things work. That's one thing. The other thing is, like, they're completely they're completely doing the opposite of just hunting. They are liberalizing. Like they're like how can I say this? They're hunting people, but just in an indirect way. For example, he went on to liberalize more weapons to people. Now you can have, like, trying to pass a law now that you can have more guns in your possession, in your house. Or he's like supporting and let go of people doing more killings. Not mostly in the streets, but uh, going out to kill more indigenous people and for wood or for space in hunting. And at the same time, he's completely demoralizing or even destroying uh, institutions that could handle this and could watch for them, could watch for the indigenous people, even if it's by naming other people or naming people that he knows he can trust to demoralize this structure completely, or even destroying it completely, like uh, passing a decree that's gonna make it stop functioning or fuse with other ministries, or you know giving it giving it more less, actually giving it less money to work. So he's kind of circulating us in a sense. He's not going for the communists right away, even though we have a law that it's just awaiting for voting in the Congress, that it's like it forbids at the same way that our law forbids Nazi symbols, the Nazi symbolism. He's going to forbid, and it was a law written by one of his sons that was a federal deputy. uh it's just waiting for voting, and with this Congress that he almost took it off. Like, there's a lot of newcomers, you can say newcomers, or at least people who never were federal deputies before, that it's from his party, that was like completely insignificant 4 years ago, and now because of him they have like 52 federal deputies. They had like one 4 years ago. They elected one in 2014. Now they elected 52. So there, and that's the point. We're completely aware that at any point this is coming. Like, he's can't grab the bull by the horns right now because he's completely inexperienced. But at the first time that he got his hands on how to do and how to rule over the country, we're completely aware that he's going to do it. We have another communist party here, the same way that you have a lot, and a lot of people, a lot of countries have more than one communist party. We have my party, that is the Brazilian Communist Party, which is the oldest one, and we have the Communist Party of Brazil. It was founded in '62, and just in terms to be more straight here, you can compare them to the CPUSA nowadays, with little to none differentiation. Like you
Mhm.
can tell them they're like just like the CPUSA is like a supportive line for the Democrats. The Partido Comunista do Brasil, the Communist Party of Brazil, they're just like a supportive line of the Workers' Party. So, but they have some federal deputies there, and they trade away voting for the Bolsonaro's choice of head of Congress. They voted for Bolsonaro's president of the Congress in exchange for keeping the name and keeping the symbols, because of this law. But we know that like they don't have the power to negotiate. It was like someone petting a dog. Like, okay, puppy, I'm not gonna forbid you right away, but just to let you know, there's a sword in your head like swinging around, and I can drop it off like anytime I want,
Mhm.
and you get nothing for it. Like, they're completely powerless right now.
Mhm. Well, with all that, we're starting to edge on 30 minutes. So, is there anything overall that you want to sum up, or just want people to know about like the Brazilian situation, or anything particular about Latin America?
Well, I think we're entering like a stage in which not even parties like the Workers' Party, not even Christina Kirchner, not even these folks that are social democrats at the very best, they're not being allowed anymore. There's no room for negotiation, there's no room for talks between the working class and the bourgeoisie. Even though the working class is going to win is going to win far less than the bourgeoisie is going in the outcome, there's no room even for that anymore. So that's what symbolizes Macri. That's what symbolizes what Guaido is trying to do, and any other country in Latin America right now. Chile with Piñera, they don't have the strength anymore to to do anything about it. Like, they just want to pass their agenda right away, with no talks, with no negotiations, and if possible, with no hope for people, no rescue, no communist party to make an opposition and make people realize what's the real problem. So it's gonna be a tough time, and that's why we need full solidarity, and full fightings actually. uh, Not only solidarity, but for example, any strike you can get in the first world, in countries that are ruled by the starters of all this, in a sense, like Trump, or Macron in France. Like, literally all the fights are very welcome right now, because they can show us like that the first starters of this are having troubles, and that our fights are not at all disconnected. A lot of fights that the teachers are facing in Los Angeles, for example, or how the educational system is right now in the U.S., is being studied by these governments here, and are being in study not only because they think it's good, it's because they think it's worse for us, but they think it's good for what we call the high whales of the big whales of uh, educational systems, private educational systems here, for example. So any fight you can keep on, if you can go off in the streets, and if you can protest, if you can get yourself organized in a political movement, in a political party, everything at all if you can do to help the struggle and to show some solidarity, even if it's for your local workers, everything works for us as well, because it shows that not everything is perfect. Show us that the US is not the path to follow blindly. They're not our leader that we must follow and do exactly the same things. Like, I think that's the most thing you could do to us, and that would be a big help already.
Well, thank you so much for showing up. I loved having someone beyond just the typical American perspective. So thank you so much for showing up. For everyone listening, this is basically just kind of like designed to be a build up for our future video that we're planning on doing soon on Venezuela, giving us background on different Latin American nations. So for anyone intrigued or wanting us to do a video about Venezuela, since it is very critical that we do a video on that kind of soon due to this crisis and just trying to build people's knowledge on it. So that's going to come very soon. I hope everyone enjoyed listening. I hope everyone enjoyed getting a different perspective. Once again, I'm very thankful to Leo for showing up and giving us some of his time. Thank you everyone for listening. This has been the ULF. I am Chairman Jack.
And I'm Leo. Thank you very much, guys.